Look closely at this face. For centuries, everyone assumed they were looking at a saint. A penitent. A biblical woman mourning her sins in solitude. But there's a theory, backed by X-rays, by comparison with the artist's other work, that says something else entirely, that the woman crying in this painting isn't Mary Magdalene at all. It might be a self-portrait. A 17th-century woman painting her own exhaustion, her own grief, and hiding it inside a religious commission so it would be acceptable to show. This is Mary Magdalene as Melancholy, by Artemisia Gentileschi. And there's more hiding in this canvas than most viewers ever notice. Born in Rome in 1593, Artemisia Gentileschi was trained by her father, the painter Caravaggio Gentileschi, in the dramatic, high-contrast naturalism associated with Caravaggio. By her teenage years she was already producing technically accomplished work, remarkable for anyone that age, especially at a time when women weren't formally admitted into painters' workshops or academies the way men were. Her career eventually took her from Rome to Florence, Venice, Naples, and the English court, painting for patrons as powerful as Philip IV of Spain and Charles I of England. But her biography includes a moment that shadows almost every reading of her work. At 17, she was abused by Agostino Tassi, an artist her father had brought in to tutor her. She testified against him in a public trial, at a time when doing so meant enduring further humiliation and even physical examination in court, and she won. Art historians have long debated how much of that experience shows up in her paintings. It's a question we can't fully answer, and one worth being careful with. But when you look at how often Artemisia painted women alone with their pain, grieving, exhausted, staring past the viewer, it's hard not to wonder what she was working through on the canvas. That question becomes especially interesting with today's painting. Mary Magdalene as Melancholy was painted sometime between 1622 and 1625, and today hangs in the Museo Soumaya in Mexico City. Here's the twist, it isn't unique. Artemisia painted an almost identical composition, known as the Penitent Magdalene, now kept in the treasury of Seville Cathedral in Spain. Same pose, same lighting, same slumped weight of the head against the hand. Two versions of the same idea, painted by the same artist. And when conservators X-rayed both paintings, they found real differences. In the Seville version, the fabric covering Mary Magdalene's shoulder is wider, most likely added later, to make the image more modest and acceptable for a church setting. And more strikingly, the faces in the two paintings aren't quite the same. That detail is what fuels the self-portrait theory. Art historians comparing the Mexico City face to Artemisia's confirmed self-portraits, including her Judith slaying Holofernes and her Cleopatra, have argued the resemblance is too close to be coincidence. We can't say this with total certainty. Attribution and identity in 17th century painting are notoriously hard to prove. But it's a genuinely compelling possibility that underneath the religious subject, Artemisia may have been looking back at herself. Now let's actually look at what's happening on the canvas. Mary Magdalene sits with her head resting heavily on her hand, eyes reddened as if she's been crying for hours. This is the classic pose of melancholia, one of the four temperaments in old medical and philosophical thought, associated with grief, introspection, and a kind of paralyzing sorrow. Artists had used this exact hand-to-head gesture for over a century to signal this person is lost in thought, and that thought is heavy. Her posture isn't dramatic. It isn't theatrical. She's not looking up toward heaven in ecstatic transformation, she's looking down, or nowhere at all. That's a very different emotional register than a lot of Baroque religious painting, which often pushes toward spectacle. This is quieter. Almost private. Beside her sits a small perfume bottle, the detail worth pausing on, because it's actually a little bit of visual confusion inherited across centuries of art history. That type of vessel is traditionally associated with Mary of Bethany, a different biblical woman, But by this period painters had already merged her story with Mary Magdalene's in popular imagination. The ointment jar becomes shorthand for the woman who anointed Christ's feet, regardless of which Mary it originally belonged to. Artemisia is simply working within an iconographic tradition that was already blurred long before she picked up a brush. Quick pause, because everything I just walked you through, the pose, the symbolism, the comparison between two versions of the same painting, comes from a simple framework you can use on literally any artwork, in any museum, without needing an art history degree. I put it together as a free resource, the 5-minute art reading checklist by the Blaze of Art. It's completely free SND. It'll change the way you look at paintings. If you want it, just subscribe and comment art in this video and I'll reply and send the link to you for free. Now, look at the crease of fabric and shadow where Mary Magdalene's arm meets her body, right under that exposed shoulder. It's a small, almost throwaway passage of paint. But at least one researcher, Guillermo Tovar de Teresa, has argued that this fold is deliberately suggestive, a visual allusion to intimacy, even sexuality, tucked quietly into a painting of religious penitence. Is that reading correct? Impossible to know for certain. This is one researcher's interpretation, not a settled fact, and reasonable art historians disagree on how much intention to read into a single brushstroke. But it points to something real about Artemisia's work in general. She painted the female body with an awareness of how it would be looked at, and she often let that tension sit right on the surface of otherwise acceptable religious subjects. A grieving saint who is also, unmistakably, a woman. A penitent whose body is still being watched, even in solitude. That layering, piety and physicality occupying the same inch of canvas, is part of what makes Artemisia's religious paintings so different from most of her male contemporaries. Technically, this painting is Artemisia working confidently within the Caravaggesque tradition she inherited from her father and refined on her own, a single dramatic light source, a near-black background, and a palette built around deep, saturated color rather than fine detail in the shadows. Her brushwork is loose and assured, not overworked. The face carries small, deliberate imperfections, reddened lids, a slightly asymmetrical gaze, none of the idealized porcelain smooth skin you'd find in a more conventional devotional image. That specificity is exactly what makes the self-portrait theory feel plausible. This doesn't look like an invented generic scent face. It looks observed. Whether or not this is truly Artemisia's own face, Mary Magdalene as Melancholy captures something she returned to again and again across her career: women processing grief, guilt, and exhaustion on their own terms, without an audience in the frame to perform for. It's a reminder that even within the rigid subject matter the church demanded from painters of her era, Artemisia found room to paint something startlingly personal, and 400 years later, we're still trying to figure out exactly how much of herself she left in it. Artemisia Gentileschi painted women who were furious, grieving, transcendent, and quietly, privately exhausted, and this Magdalene might be the most personal of them all. If you want to start noticing details like this, the hidden self-portraits, the symbolism, the choices an artist makes in every square inch of a canvas, go download my free guide, the 5-minute checklist to analyze any masterpiece. To get it, comment art in this video and I'll send the link to you completely free. The Blaze of Art is an independent project born in Argentina to rescue and preserve the most fascinating stories in art history. If you wish to support our mission and help us keep creating, please subscribe, follow our social media, support us via PayPal using the links below. Every small contribution keeps this flame alive.